this white soil, that doesn't grow plants. It does hardly even grows trees. I had to make my own soil through composting. This is our central greenhouse. Compost is the key to organic farming.
Rock Hopper here, and in my previous video you met David and Stephen and family who are homesteading in British Columbia just below the Yukon border. I showed you how they live off-grid in the Canadian wilderness. Now I'm going to let Stephen tell you in depth as to how he and his wife Alyssa grow most of their food, which is organic, abundant, and delicious. And they manage to do this in difficult soil in one of the harshest climates on Earth. If they can do it where they are, it's likely you can grow a bountiful garden wherever you live. But tell me about this greenhouse.
This is our central greenhouse. We have two main greenhouses. This one's 72 feet long in total. We're in the east half, which is 32 feet long, and this one's our hottest one because it faces east, so it gets full sun from morning until late afternoon. The hoop ring design also maximizes your sun retention because, especially with this woven fabric, this is a specific greenhouse fabric made in Manitoba, Canada, which reflects the light. It diffuses it and makes it reflect in all directions. So it's less intense than having a clear membrane like 6mm poly, for example, which could burn your plants. This one here allows the sun to come through and then reflect in all different directions. So it's a very light and heat intensive greenhouse, and it's low ceiling, so it gets very hot. And yeah, things look a little brown in here because it's already, middle of September and it's the end of the season, so things are pretty much winding down for the season. But as you can see, we do have some pumpkins that we got this year, and kale and calendula and all that kind of stuff. And I think right now our objective is to look at the compost. So this is my compost heap. It runs all the way down to the end. So that's actually, that section from the kale down is actually completed compost, and the kale, that's just volunteer kale that just came up because it loves growing on its own accord. So that's the finished compost, goes down there. The new stuff goes in at this end. So what we're seeing here is what I put on yesterday. And the key with compost is keeping things small, like chopping it up, hence the machete. So if I see anything that's big, I chop it up into small pieces. So everything that goes on gets chopped. So you want to keep it small and you want to keep it moist. Proper moisture balance is critical. If you live in like Washington State or something, or lower British Columbia, you may have too much moisture, but where we live, north of 60 degrees in a subarctic semi-arid climate, it's dry. So I water my compost, and my rule is if I'm watering my plants and my flowers, I water my compost, because the compost needs the water in order to rot. And I turn it once a day, a little bit. I don't do a big chore. Like what you'll see me do here right now is about as much as I do in a day. Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 forkfuls. And that way I'm not busting my back and making it an ordeal. I'm making it a daily task. It's a discipline. And most people are not disciplined at their compost, and that's why they have very poor compost. And a compost is the key to organic farming. It's the absolute key, is composting. It's not just not using chemicals or fertilizers. It's producing biomass, producing soil, producing compost, producing humus, such that your plants can grow. And up here north of 60, like I had to make all my own soil. When I first got here, there was 2 inches of topsoil. And now, 32 years later, truckload after truckload, meaning hundreds of truckloads of manure and compost and horse manure and cow manure and spruce needles and sawdust and sphagnum moss and whatever I can find, anything organic that I can find, grass clippings, whatever, compost from the restaurants, whatever. I brought it in, and then on the compost it goes. And chop it up, water it, turn it, love it up, make soil. Because without soil, we humans are toast. If we lose our soil, we lose our ability to produce food. And I'm not going to rely upon those that want us to eat stuff that's not produced from God-given soil and God-given plants and animals. This is what we're supposed to eat. So in here there's red wiggler worms, and that is my last thing I'm going to say right now about compost is you gotta have red wigglers or something in there. Those little worms, they will break down organic matter into humus, and they really aid your compost. They help so much. And chickens love them, so I feed them to my chickens every day, 1 bucket a day. And they just go bonkers over them because they're high in protein. Yeah.
And everything you grow here is organic.
Yes. Yeah, I don't buy a single piece of fertilizer. I only believe in putting compost in. It's a question of how much compost you have to put in. So compost is at a premium. Other people who I garden with will say, "Hey, you're using too much compost. We only have so much." So it's always a question: is how much compost, and which one is going to go on that year. So you have to be judicious in your application of compost. Which crops need it this year in which bed, and so you've got to keep track of your garden. You have to have a garden layout and plot numbers and know what was in what year, and then rotate. That's the key of organic farming, is crop rotation. And then how much compost did we put in last year? 4 buckets, 5 buckets, and then write it down so you know. Keep track of that stuff. And that's the only way. Like, I don't use little test kits and all that kind of stuff. I keep it up here and in my paperwork so I know what's gone in. And it's a question of how many buckets. 5-gallon buckets. So everything's about buckets. 5-gallon buckets. 20 liters of stuff in a bucket.
Now let me ask you this. Now there are plants that others would consider weeds.
Yes.
Do you eat some of the weeds?
All of them.
All of them?
All of them. Absolutely. I even propagate them. So I even plant them on purpose. So over here, for example, this is lamb's quarters. So, I mean, this is just, as I said, my finished compost here. This is what it looks like when it's finished. And it's dry because I haven't watered it, but that's finished compost, light and fluffy and rich. And this lamb's quarters, I mean, this is from the springtime, so it's gone to seed already. But when it's young, it's fresh and vibrant, and I put it in my salads. The kale, that's a volunteer, that's coming up. So that goes in my salads. Here we have watercress that's growing as a weed because it's just propagated itself. Dandelion, you can eat dandelion, high in vitamin A and vitamin C. This one's a little old, it'll be a little bitter, but oh well. So here we have a cucumber plant growing in a 45-gallon barrel. And we got lots of cucumbers here. Lots of cucumbers. The thing about raised beds is the deeper the soil, the deeper the roots. And for example, carrot roots, the taproot will go down 5 feet. Tomatoes, same thing. Cucumbers less so, maybe 2 to 3 feet for cucumbers. But the more soil you have, the more mass you have, and the bigger the plants will be and healthier. So I like the barrels. They're simple and they're easy. The other thing that I only recently just started doing is freezers. So this one here, we've already harvested a full bed of carrots out of here. They were planted in the springtime, and they're all, well, I guess we left a few here. There's still a few there left over, but like these were ready in the summer, whereas normally you plant in the spring and they're ready in the fall. Same thing over here. We got lots of beets. So I'll just pull out one beet. And the freezers are handy because, again, you have the depth, not as deep as a barrel, but you have length. So if you're doing row crops like beets or carrots, it's kind of handy. It's easier and more space efficient. Down this way we got parsley, and then that was also carrots. It's already out. That was beans. They're already out because it's the end of the season, and that's just cilantro and chickweed, which we eat. And the cilantro is going to seed, and so I'm letting it go to seed because then we're going to save the seed, and then you can eat that green. You can chop that up as coriander, green coriander, or you can let it dry, use it as seeds for next year, or dry it and pulverize it in your mortar and pestle and then use that as a spice.
Tell me about chickweed.
Chickweed. Chickweed is a wonderful plant. It is considered by most people to be a weed, but it is so versatile. For me, it's a salad crop. So you can harvest it fresh like that and put it in a salad. It's wonderful. It's soft. It's luscious. Greeny taste, not really particularly strong, but very good for you. The other thing with chickweed is it's good as a topical for insect bites, rashes, skin irritations, and things like that. You can make a poultice out of it. You can actually just take it like this and masticate it either in your mouth or in your hand, just like that. Just rubbing it around. So if I had a burn, like if I burn myself right here, right now, just do that. It's that simple, and put it on. And just hold it there. Or put a bandage on and look at all the moisture coming out. Look at that. That's pure 100% healing power. Nature's healing power. And it's that simple.
And you can also do that with plantain.
Absolutely. Plantain, comfrey, borage, you know, the list goes on and on and on. Fireweed. Like, we were given all these things, right? And Creator was kind to us, gave us everything that we needed. Everything that we need. It's all here. We just need to ask.
And this is the chickweed. Also in Latin is called Stellaria media. I believe that's the Latin name. And I think it may mean half star due to the flower, the little flower there. And this is the main outdoor garden. Tell us about this, Stephen.
Well, when I first got here 32 years ago, there was about this much topsoil. So I had to make my own soil through composting. And so now, if we go down, like I used to be able to go down and then I'd hit a hard pan, which was called alkali or calcium carbonate. And now, with that guy, I can go down. There's 9, there's 12. That's 12 inches. I now have 12 inches of topsoil here. It varies throughout the garden, but I say a standard of minimum of 8 inches. And this is rich topsoil. It's called friable, which means that it's loose, it's not compacted. It should be able to squeeze together, hold together, and if you bounce it 3 times, fall apart. An old farmer in Ontario, Canada showed me that one years ago. So this here now, it's brown, it's rich, but if I go down to the old native soil way at the bottom, it's going to be white and gray and hard. And I don't know if I'm actually going to get down there because I've brought so much soil in over the years and made soil and composted that I'm actually not getting down. Look at that.
But before
Beautiful.
you created this soil, it was basically just rock and...
no, it was a hard pan
just
on the
hard
bottom.
pan.
So it's calcium carbonate was the native soil here.
Explain exactly what is calcium carbonate.
This hard stuff here, this is a rock now that came out of the water or precipitated out. It's calcium carbonate because we live at a warm springs. So this rock and the white soil, like this kind of stuff, you can see it here, this white soil, that doesn't grow plants. It does hardly even grows trees. This stuff here, this white stuff, because it's highly alkaline. It's not acidic, it's not balanced, it's alkaline. It's the far end of the alkalinity spectrum. And it compacts as well and doesn't hold moisture very well. So that's what was here when I got here, with 2 inches of soil on top of it. And that's what we've had to develop over the years, is make soil so that you have something. This is still fine as a base layer, but you don't want to incorporate it or mix it into your soil too much. We have warm springs here, so it precipitates out of the water, the calcium carbonate. So it was like a white, rocky, sandy layer. Don't think there's any around here right now. But that was our hard pan on the bottom, and a little bit of soil and mineral soil and duff on top. And now this is what we've got. And it took me 3 decades to do that. But you get the result, right? You've got kale and cabbage, and we've got carrots over here. A mouse was getting into this one. That's one of our biggest problems, is mice and voles. So they're constantly doing that. But then we feed this to the bunnies, And then I'll just cut this off too and feed that to the bunnies. And then you're left with a great carrot.
Let's go inside the greenhouse, one of them. A lot of raspberry bushes in here. Got some mint growing. Numerous vegetables. Squash down there. More squash. And this is all watered from the warm springs that flow on the property. Definitely feels warmer and more humid inside here. Pumpkins. I hope you learned a bit about gardening in less than favorable conditions up here near the southern border of the Yukon. Don't forget to give me a like on the video, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Rockhopper. I'll see ya.